Okay, let's talk about a word that makes pretty much every academic shudder: retraction, right? For most people, it just screams failure, maybe even the end of a career. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? Seriously, what if a retraction wasn't a mark of shame, but actually a sign of incredible strength? A deep, profound commitment to getting the science right. Now, to really get our heads around this, we need a new way of thinking about it. And it comes from a place you might not expect: an ancient Japanese art form. And that art is kintsugi. The whole philosophy here is that the pottery is actually more beautiful because it was broken and then repaired. The cracks aren't something to hide. No, they're filled with gold, highlighted, celebrated. They tell a story. So today, we're going to explore how we can apply this exact mindset to science itself. How we can treat retractions not as these shameful failures, but as golden seams that actually make the body of scientific knowledge stronger and, frankly, more valuable. All right, so before we can start reframing things, we've got to understand what's actually going on. Why do papers get retracted in the first place, and how often is this really happening? The data, well, it's pretty eye-opening. So when you look at the numbers, the story is way more complicated than you'd think. Yeah, sure. Intentional misconduct, that's about half the cases. But look at the rest of this. About 14% are just honest-to-goodness errors. And a massive 35% fall into this other or unknown category. And that tells us something really, really important. A retraction doesn't automatically mean someone cheated. Just understanding that difference, the difference between a mistake and misconduct, that's the first huge step. And let's get some perspective here. Even though we hear more about retractions these days, they are still incredibly rare. We're talking about maybe 4 retractions for every 10,000 papers that get published. So no, this is not some epidemic of bad science. It's a small, but absolutely vital part of how science corrects itself. But these numbers, they don't tell the human story. Behind every single one of these stats is a person, a researcher, facing what is probably one of the toughest choices of their career. What does it actually feel like to be the one who finds the mistake in your own work and decides you have to speak up? And this quote, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? For so many of these researchers, the decision to retract isn't about being afraid of getting caught. It's about a deep personal sense of honesty and duty to their field. It's about making sure that no one else builds on flawed work. It's pure integrity. And this is where it gets really fascinating. There's this massive disconnect between what authors fear will happen and what actually does. I mean, they're terrified, right? Terrified of ruining their reputation, of their career being over. But the reality was often the complete opposite. Get this. One researcher was actually praised by a reviewer on a later paper for being precise and considerate because she had retracted her previous work. Others got invited to conferences to talk about it. It turns out the scientific community, more often than not, really values that kind of honesty. So this all brings us right back to our main idea, back to kintsugi. How do we take this mindset and bake it right into the culture of science? How do we get our institutions to respond not with fear and punishment, but with repair and support? Okay, here's the philosophical core of it all. A retraction isn't about hitting the delete key on a mistake. It's an active, powerful process of remaking the scientific record. The author is stepping up and saying, hey everyone, I no longer stand by this. And by doing that, they're fulfilling their most important obligation to science. It's a real act of repair that, just like kintsugi, leaves a visible, valuable mark. So how do we make this philosophy a reality? Look, we can't just leave it up to individual researchers to be brave on their own. The institutions, from the department level all the way up to the dean's office, have a huge role to play in building a framework that actually supports integrity. For any dean or associate dean of research out there, think of this as your playbook. Number 1, have clear policies that make a distinction between honest error and misconduct. That alone gets rid of the automatic assumption of guilt. 2, create a confidential help desk, a safe place where researchers can get advice without being afraid. 3, champion real, ongoing training. And I don't mean just ticking a box for compliance. I mean building a shared culture. And finally, and this one is so important, publicly acknowledge and support researchers who do the right thing. When you celebrate them, you send a message to everyone that integrity matters more than perfection. So, what would a place like this Research Integrity Help Desk actually do? Well, it's not an internal affairs department, it's a support system. It gives you advice on tricky things like authorship before they become problems. It gives you a confidential place to talk about errors. It can even help mediate disputes. And this is critical, it connects researchers to mental health resources because, let's be real, this process is incredibly stressful. It's all about being proactive, not punitive. And of course, the culture of any department really comes down to the people in it. So as colleagues, the choice is pretty simple. You can offer support and just listen, or you can gossip and isolate people, uphold the process, or jump to conclusions. It's so important not to be the judge and jury here. Your job is to support the person and the process because that's how you build a research environment that people actually want to be a part of. And all of this, it all leads to one final, really transformative idea. When we actually embrace this kind of supportive, transparent approach, we completely change what a retraction even means for science. I mean, this is the goal right here. To get to a place where retracting a paper because you found an honest mistake isn't some whispered failure. It's an act of scientific integrity that we celebrate out loud. It's proof that the system is working. It's proof that a researcher cared more about the truth than their ego. That is how we build a stronger, more trustworthy scientific record, by celebrating the golden seams of its repair. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. Whether you're a dean, a department chair, a mentor, or a colleague, you have a role to play in this. So the next time a crack appears in the scientific record, how are you going to help mend it with gold? Thanks for digging into this with me.